Usually when we think of a survival guide, we picture, I don't know, the wilderness.
Right, yeah. Like Bear Grylls stuff.
Exactly. You imagine learning how to start a fire with 2 damp sticks, or how to purify muddy water, maybe how to build a shelter out of, like, pine branches.
Sure.
It's all about surviving the external elements, but I feel like we are surviving a completely different kind of jungle today.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the modern wilderness isn't a forest, it's our own living rooms, it's, open plan offices. It's the relentless ping of a push notification.
Yeah, that constant buzzing.
Right. And the low-grade panic of a crowded inbox, and just the absolute exhaustion of trying to fall asleep while your brain is running a marathon of anxiety.
It is exhausting.
It really is. And ironically, the ultimate survival manual for this hyper-modern jungle was actually written centuries ago.
Which is wild to think about.
So wild. So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are doing something really special. For you listening right now, we are looking at a highly specialized text today. It's a textual commentary analyzing 2 profoundly impactful verses from Chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Specifically focusing on a section known as Dhyana Yoga.
Right. And I have to say, this isn't some dry, abstract religious sermon.
No, not at all.
The source material you've brought us is framed as a direct message. It's like a master class addressed to someone named Vijay, unpacking the deep psychological foundations for mastering our inner world. Okay, let's unpack this, because it is fascinating to me how a text this old can perfectly diagnose 21st century anxiety.
Well, that's precisely why this text is so relevant for you, the listener, navigating today's landscape. I mean, we really need to look at this material not as ancient poetry, but as a highly technical, remarkably precise manual for human cognitive regulation.
Cognitive regulation. I like that framing.
Yeah, because the verses we're analyzing, they don't just offer these empty platitudes like, find your peace or whatever.
Yeah. Right, the typical self-help stuff.
Exactly. They methodically break down the exact mechanical reasons why our baseline state is chaos. And then they outline the step-by-step psychological process to reclaim our equilibrium.
Okay, so let's start with that baseline of chaos then. Because the text begins by setting a standard for what actual balance looks like.
Yes, it does.
In a world that feels like it's constantly spinning out of control, what is the actual target here? The text points us to a specific verse, right? Shloka 6.4.
Yeah, Shloka 6.4 establishes this ultimate benchmark. The translation provided in the commentary we're looking at reads, and I'll just quote it here, when a person is neither attached to sensory pleasures nor to actions, and has renounced all desire-driven mental projections, which the text calls sankalpa.
Sankalpa.
Right. Then they are said to have elevated themselves in yoga.
Okay, so the phrase elevated themselves in yoga feels a little, a bit abstract to me.
It does sound a bit lofty.
Yeah. But the text unpacks the specific Sanskrit term used here, yogaruta. And the commentary translates this as being enthroned in yoga. And the etymology of that word, enthroned, that really shifts the perspective for me.
How so?
Well, it's not just about feeling relaxed,
No, it completely reframes the goal. Think about the physical and psychological implications of a throne.
Okay.
A throne is a seat of immense stability, right? It's about authority and immovability. Being yogaruka isn't describing that fleeting, fragile sense of peace you get for like 20 minutes after a hot shower.
Or after a really good yoga class.
Exactly. The text is pointing to a deeply established structural state of psychological equilibrium.
So it's a foundation.
Yes. You are seated firmly in your own balance, observing the kingdom of your life, basically, regardless of the chaos happening around that throne.
Okay, but wait. Renouncing sensory pleasures, because that sounds like a recipe for a miserable ascetic life.
I know, it sounds intense.
It does. Like,
Yeah.
am I supposed to stop enjoying my morning coffee? Am I supposed to stop listening to good music or enjoying a nice dinner out? Because if being enthroned means stripping away literally everything that makes human life enjoyable, it feels completely disconnected from the reality of anyone living in the modern world.
I get that completely. And honestly, that is the most common and perhaps most dangerous misinterpretation of classical Eastern philosophy.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And the commentary to Vijay is very careful to clarify this exact friction. The text is not advocating for a barren, joyless existence. That's a huge misconception.
Oh, thank goodness, because I love my coffee.
We all do. The critical mechanism here hinges on the word attached. The Sanskrit term is indrarthyo, which refers to the objects of the senses.
Okay.
So it's about the attachment to those sensory pleasures and the actions that secure them. not the actual experience of the pleasure itself.
Ah, I see. So the issue isn't the coffee. The issue is the total psychological collapse that happens if I don't get the coffee.
Precisely. Enjoying a cup of coffee is just a neutral, pleasant sensory experience. What this verse targets is the compulsive, rigid need for that specific sensory input to regulate your emotional state.
Wow. Yeah, that hits close to home.
Right. It's targeting the moment when your entire morning is ruined or you snap at a colleague purely because your expected dopamine hit was denied.
Wow.
The text is basically diagnosing the compulsion to satisfy the next craving as a fundamental leak of our psychological energy.
And the commentary makes a brilliant leap here, too, because it maps this ancient concept of indriarthia directly onto the modern attention economy.
Yes, this is where it gets incredibly practical.
It talks about how the digital world we live in is literally engineered to exploit this exact vulnerability. We were talking about the architecture of push notifications, infinite scrolling, the whole algorithmic delivery of instant gratification.
The modern digital economy is essentially a multi-trillion-dollar machine designed to keep us off the throne.
That is such a good way to put it.
It is built to hijack our attention by creating these artificial cravings. I mean, when you look at the neuroscience behind app development, designers are deliberately utilizing the principles of variable reward schedules.
Which is the exact same mechanics used in slot machines, right?
Exactly the same. They use it to trigger dopamine loops in the primitive parts of our brain. And what's wild is that this ancient text is warning against the exact psychological enslavement that these modern technologies rely on.
Let's ground this in the listener's immediate reality for a second. Picture this. You are sitting at your desk trying to do deep, focused work.
A struggle we all know.
Right, and your phone is sitting face up next to your keyboard. Suddenly, the screen lights up with a notification banner.
Just a tiny flashlight.
Yep. But you feel an actual physiological pull in your chest. It's like a tightening or a sudden spike in your heart rate, just urging you to reach out and check it.
That right there is the dopamine loop.
Yeah. And the text is arguing that when you can look at that notification, acknowledge the flash of light and the biological urge, and then actively choose not to let it pull your mind away from your task, you are literally putting Shloka 6.4 into practice.
Because in that precise micro moment of choosing not to look, you are severing the attachment.
Right.
You are experiencing the sensory input, the visual stimulus of the screen lighting up, but you are refusing to be enslaved by the compulsion to act on it.
You stay on the throne.
You're remaining on the throne. You are exercising cognitive sovereignty rather than letting some random piece of code dictate your physical actions and your mental focus.
That is so powerful. But, the text doesn't actually stop at external distractions.
No, it goes much deeper.
If the first half of the verse is about navigating these external pulls, the notifications, the coffee, the sensory inputs, the second half pivots to address something far more insidious, I think.
It absolutely does.
It diagnoses the internal distractions we manufacture entirely on our own.
Right, so the text shifts from the external environment to the internal landscape. And it introduces a deeply profound concept called sarva sankalpa.
Sarva sankalpa.
Yeah, and the commentary translates this as renouncing all desire-driven mental projections.
Sankalpa. The commentary defines this as our chronic tendency to overplan, like obsessively outlining how the future must unfold in order for us to be satisfied.
And what's fascinating here is looking at why an ancient text, one that prioritizes inner peace, would focus so heavily on the mundane habit of planning.
Yeah, you wouldn't think planning is a bad thing.
Right. But the commentary explains that sankalpa isn't just making a grocery list.
Okay.
It is the root mechanism of anxiety. It is the relentless generation of what-if scenarios.
Oh, man. The what-ifs.
It is the cognitive trap of conditional happiness. You know the feeling. Only when I secure that promotion, or only when I buy that house, or only when my partner changes this specific behavior, then I will finally allow myself to be happy.
It's like we are writing an incredibly rigid software program for our own lives.
That's a great analogy.
We write this complex code detailing exactly how our career trajectory must execute, or exactly how a difficult conversation with our boss is supposed to play out, and we hard-code hundreds of specific variables that absolutely must align.
And if we know anything about overly complex, rigidly coded software, it's that it is highly prone to crashing.
Exactly. You've staked your entire psychological stability on this brittle algorithmic structure.
Yes.
And the reality of the universe is just chaos. It's constantly introducing unexpected variables. So the second an unpredicted variable enters the system, say your flight gets canceled, or a client pulls out, or someone makes a weird comment at a dinner party, your internal program just
It
crashes.
completely shuts down.
You experience devastating frustration or anxiety, not because the reality of the canceled flight is actually unsurvivable, but because your sankalpa, your desire-driven projection of how the day was supposed to go, was destroyed.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the cognitive distortion the text is highlighting. When we are trapped in sankalpa, we are basically operating under the illusion of control. Obsessive future tripping is an attempt by the ego to control an inherently uncontrollable universe.
Which is exhausting.
It really is. And furthermore, if we look at this through the lens of modern biology, the human nervous system is terrible at distinguishing between a real, present physical threat and an imagined future disaster.
Oh, wait, really?
Oh, yeah. When you spend 2 hours agonizing over a hypothetical argument you might have tomorrow, you are bathing your brain in cortisol and adrenaline right now.
Wow. So your body thinks the fight is already happening.
Exactly. You are exhausting your biological resources for an event that hasn't even happened.
So you literally aren't present for your actual life. You are emotionally reacting to a phantom timeline.
Which leads directly to the text's proposed antidote. The solution to the exhaustion of Sankalpa is quieting that projection engine.
Okay.
It is the discipline of bringing the mind into a state of absolute presence with whatever task is immediately in front of you.
Let's apply this to how you, the listener, approach your day. Just think about it. How much cognitive bandwidth are you losing to future tripping?
Probably a lot more than you realize.
Yeah. Like when you are drafting a sensitive email, are you just focusing on communicating the facts clearly? Or are you simultaneously agonizing over how the recipient will interpret the tone?
Or what their counterargument will be.
Right. And how your manager will view the exchange and how this will affect your performance review in 6 months.
It snowballs so fast.
It does. Absolute presence means pulling all of those scattered cognitive resources back to the simple act of typing the sentence in front of you.
And the commentary argues that when you achieve that absolute presence, when you drop the exhausting mental projections and simply engage with the reality of the present moment without all those agonizing what-ifs, you naturally arrive back at the state of yogaruha.
Back on the throne.
Exactly. You are enthroned in your own agency.
Okay, I love this, but I have to be honest. Realizing my mind is constantly building these rigid projections actually makes me more anxious.
I hear that. Why is that?
Because I can't figure out how to turn the projection engine off. Like, if I know that future tripping is causing my cortisol to spike, why does my brain keep doing it automatically?
That's the big question.
Knowing the diagnosis isn't the same as having the cure, you know?
And that is the exact friction that necessitates the transition to the next verse.
Oh, okay.
Because Shloka 6.4 gives us the diagnosis, the dopamine loops, and the sankalpa, and it gives us the goal, which is absolute presence. But to understand the mechanics of how to intervene in that automatic process, the commentary moves us to Shloka 6.5.
Which dives into the operational mechanics of the mind itself.
Yes.
Let's look closely at the translation the text provides for Shloka 6.5. It reads, "Elevate yourself through the power of your own mind and do not degrade yourself. For the mind can be your greatest friend, and the mind can also be your worst enemy."
This is arguably one of the most radical, empowering, and honestly challenging verses in the entire Gita.
That's heavy.
It is. The commentary highlights it because it places the ultimate responsibility for your psychological well-being squarely, unapologetically, in your own hands.
So what does this all mean, practically? Because that level of absolute accountability sounds exhausting.
It's a lot to carry.
It essentially means I can't let myself off the hook, even on a terrible day. It's saying that no one is coming to save me from my own thoughts.
That's true.
But if I genuinely have 100% agency over my mind, why does it feel like a runaway train half the time?
Because it's untrained.
But if my mind is my friend, why does it spontaneously generate a memory of an embarrassing mistake I made 3 years ago while I'm just trying to, buy groceries?
That feeling of the runaway train is a completely universal human experience. And the text's assertion of agency requires us to make a very careful distinction here.
Okay.
The commentary is explicit. We cannot always control external situations, nor can we always control the initial automatic thoughts that bubble up from the subconscious.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, our brains have evolved with a negative bias. Scanning for threats and remembering mistakes, that was an evolutionary survival mechanism.
So that spontaneous, embarrassing memory is just the brain's security system malfunctioning in aisle 4 of the grocery store.
Exactly, it's a false alarm. When the text insists we have 100% agency, it is not talking about controlling the initial firing of those automatic thoughts.
Okay, that's a relief.
It is talking about agency over the processing apparatus.
Your processing apparatus.
Right. It is talking about what you choose to do with that thought the millisecond after it appears. Having agency over your mind doesn't mean you can instantly command yourself to feel an emotion like happiness, but you have absolute control over the inner dialogue that follows the initial trigger.
So the mind isn't just a passive movie screen where thoughts play out. It's a mechanism we are actively interacting with.
Yes, actively.
And to really understand how the mind acts as either a friend or an enemy, we have to examine the specific mechanism the commentary highlights, which is our internal dialogue.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
The text breaks this down into two distinct opposing paths of self-talk, right?
It does. The commentary uses two precise Sanskrit verbs from the verse to illustrate these divergent paths, avasadyet and udhed.
Let's start with avasadiyat.
Okay, so let's examine avasadyet first, which the text translates as degrading yourself. This describes the inner voice that is perpetually critical, anxious, catastrophizing, or defeated.
And the counter to that is udhed, which means uplifting yourself.
Exactly.
That is the inner voice that is patient, encouraging, focused on solutions, and anchored in the present.
And what is so crucial about this framing is that the text treats the mind not as a static object you possess, but as an active, ongoing conversation you are participating in.
We are constantly talking to ourselves.
Exactly. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, the default mode network in our brains is running a continuous narrative. And this text forces us to confront the profound psychological toll of that narrative.
Yeah.
Notice the vocabulary here. When your inner voice is relentlessly critical, the text doesn't just call it unhelpful or pessimistic, it literally calls it degrading oneself.
Degrading. That's a strong word.
It structurally lowers your state of being and diminishes your cognitive capacity.
It's kind of like having a sports commentator living inside your head, narrating your life.
I like that.
Imagine you are playing a high-stakes game of tennis and you have an earpiece in. If the commentator in your ear is constantly analyzing your every move with hostility, saying like, wow, your footwork is incredibly sloppy today. You are moving too slow. Your opponent is laughing at you. You are definitely going to lose this match.
You're doomed.
You're gonna lose. Not because you lack the physical capability to hit the ball, but because the commentator systematically eroded your focus and confidence until your performance collapsed to match the narrative.
That is the avasadyet voice in action. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy of degradation.
Right. So if you want to win, you need a commentator or really a coach in your ear who operates differently.
Yes.
When you miss a shot, the coach doesn't say you are a failure. The coach says, okay, the angle was off on that swing. Let's adjust the grip. Take a deep breath. Reset your stance. You own the next point.
That's the ardent voice, the uplifting, instructional voice.
Exactly.
We can map this directly onto listeners' daily professional life, too.
Let's do it.
Consider a highly common scenario. You send an email to a major client or your department head, and 30 seconds later, you realize you attached the wrong spreadsheet. Or maybe you made a glaring typo in the first sentence.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
We've all been there. So, the external event has happened. Now, what happens in the critical 5 seconds inside your head? Does your inner voice instantly default to avasadyet?
Like, does it say, you are an absolute idiot, they think you're incompetent, this is going to ruin your reputation, you might get fired?
Yes, which instantly spikes your heart rate and puts you into a state of panic, making it incredibly difficult to actually fix the problem.
Right. Your brain just freezes.
Precisely. Or do you activate the herd approach? Does the inner voice say, okay, that was a careless mistake. Take a breath. Draft a brief, polite correction email with the correct attachment. Send it immediately. It is a minor error, not a catastrophe.
The external event, the wrong attachment, is completely neutral. It's just a tiny administrative blip.
Right.
But the commentator in your head entirely dictates whether you spend the rest of your afternoon in a state of productive flow or burning in a state of localized panic.
And when we abdicate our responsibility to manage that commentator, when we allow the degrading, catastrophic voice to run unchecked, we fall into a highly specific psychological trap that the commentary explicitly warns against.
Oh, you're talking about the trap of victimhood.
Yes,
Yeah.
the text issues a severe warning about the seduction of the victim mindset.
We have to dive deep into this because this is where the philosophy meets intense friction with modern sensibilities.
It really does.
The commentary argues that when things go wrong in our careers, in our relationships, in our daily logistics, the default human setting is to immediately assign blame outward.
Always.
We blame circumstances, we blame the economy, we blame difficult colleagues, or we just blame bad luck. Because it feels incredibly validating to say, this isn't my fault, the universe is just against me today.
But the commentary cuts through that validation with one of its most piercing insights. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text states, "No external force can harm our inner peace as much as our own uncontrolled thoughts."
No external force can harm our inner peace as much as our own uncontrolled thoughts.
Okay, I have to stop right there and challenge this deeply.
Yeah.
Because while that sounds profoundly wise on a philosophical level,
Yeah.
isn't this bordering on toxic positivity?
That's a fair question.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
Sometimes external forces do harm us, and it is genuinely someone else's fault. People can be malicious. Corporate systems can be deeply unfair and exploitative.
Right.
Genuine trauma exists.
So, are we supposed to just smile through systemic injustice and pretend we aren't victims of circumstance? Is the Gita telling us to just ignore when people hurt us?
That is the essential pushback. And the distinction the commentary makes here is razor thin, but absolutely vital.
Okay, walk me through it.
We must ground our response strictly in the framework the text provides. The text is absolutely not denying the reality of external harm. As we established earlier, it explicitly acknowledges that we cannot always control external situations.
Right.
It acknowledges that malice, unfairness, and tragedy exist in the material world. It is not advocating for delusion or toxic positivity.
So it isn't saying, if you get fired unfairly, just pretend you were happy about it.
Not at all. It separates the external event from the internal sustained suffering.
Okay, I think I'm following.
The text is arguing something far more precise regarding cognitive mechanics. If a colleague undermines you in a meeting, or a system treats you unfairly, that is an external fact. That causes a primary pain. But if you then spend the next 5 years aggressively replaying that betrayal in your head, feeding a bitter, resentful internal dialogue that poisons your outlook on every future professional relationship you have, that massive, sustained loss of inner peace is an inside job.
Wow.
An inside job.
It is your own mind acting as your worst enemy, continuously inflicting damage long after the external event has ended.
I see the distinction now. The text is saying that when we blame fate or other people for our ongoing internal emotional baseline, we're actually committing an act of profound psychological surrender.
Yes.
We are handing the external world the remote control to our internal state.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it. Blaming external variables for your lack of inner peace is a complete abdication of the agency granted in Shloka 6.5.
Right.
The moment you say, my boss is the reason I am a stressed, miserable person, you have handed over your sovereignty. You are no longer Yogaruta.
You're off the throne.
Exactly. You have vacated the throne and allowed a chaotic, indifferent circumstance to sit in it. It is a philosophy of radical, almost aggressive ownership over your internal weather. But this brings up a massive practical problem for me.
Look at that.
If handing over our agency makes the mind our worst enemy, how do we actually recruit the mind to be our greatest ally? Because the instruction the commentary gives on how to train the mind genuinely shocked me.
Is surprising.
Given how hardcore this concept of radical ownership is, I expected the methodology to be equally intense.
The contrast is quite startling, actually. Given the weight of the responsibility that your mind is the sole arbiter of your elevation or degradation, you would expect a methodology of iron-fisted control.
Right, like boot camp for your brain.
But let's look at the commentary's closing instruction regarding the process of mental mastery. It advises, treat your mind like a friend. You are training with patience and kindness, rather than an enemy you are trying to violently conquer.
Patience and kindness, not domination.
Correct. The text notes that this approach reflects the practical stages of mental mastery from a classical perspective, explaining the necessary conditions for when the mind is finally said to be under steady control.
The friction between this ancient instruction and our modern culture of self-improvement is just massive.
Oh, it's night and day.
Think about the vocabulary we use today to talk about productivity and discipline. It is steeped in aggressive, militaristic framing.
Brian culture.
Exactly. We talk about crushing our goals, destroying our bad habits, conquering our fears, dominating our morning routines. It's this hyper-masculine, brute force approach to psychology where you are essentially declaring open warfare on your own brain.
And this raises a profound logical question about the effectiveness of self-directed violence. If, as Shloka 6.5 states, your mind is the singular instrument of your elevation, why would your strategy be to go to war with it?
Right.
If your methodology is to beat your mind into submission through guilt, shame, and aggressive force, you have to remember that you are also the one taking the beating.
You're attacking yourself.
Yes, you are fracturing your own psyche.
Let's compare this to training an animal, specifically a rescue dog.
That's a beautiful analogy.
If you adopt a dog that comes with deeply ingrained problematic habits, maybe it aggressively barks at strangers or it destroys the furniture when it gets anxious, how do you actually rehabilitate it?
Right.
If you use the modern hustle culture approach, if you scream at the dog, hit it, and try to violently conquer its anxiety through sheer intimidation, what is the biological result?
It doesn't end well.
No. The dog doesn't become balanced or well-adjusted. It becomes more neurotic, highly reactive, and eventually, out of sheer terror, it will bite you. You haven't mastered the dog. You've just created an enemy living in your house.
Because inducing fear is not the same as cultivating mastery. Fear creates suppression, which is temporary and volatile. Mastery requires integration.
Exactly. But if you take the approach the commentary suggests, if you establish clear, firm boundaries, but you train the dog with immense patience, with positive reinforcement, with consistency and kindness, the nervous system of the animal eventually downregulates.
It realizes it is safe.
It learns the parameters. And over time, that chaotic rescue dog transforms into your fiercely loyal, steady companion. It becomes your protector.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the classical perspective on befriending the mind. Mental mastery is not a singular dramatic battle that you win on a mountaintop.
It's not a one-and-done thing.
No. It is the quiet, highly repetitive, moment-to-moment practice of behavioral conditioning.
So what does that moment-to-moment practice actually look like for the listener tomorrow morning?
It synthesizes everything we have unpacked today. It is the act of noticing the dopamine urge we discussed in Shloka 6.4, feeling that tight pull in your chest to check your phone during deep work, and instead of violently berating yourself for being weak or distracted, you simply notice the pull.
Okay.
And gently, firmly, redirect your eyes back to the screen.
Just redirect.
Yes. It is noticing the critical inner voice from Shloka 6.5, catching that Avasudiyat commentator whispering, "You're a failure," after a mistake, and instead of getting angry at yourself for having negative thoughts, you gently intervene. You coach it.
You coach it. You say, no, that narrative isn't useful right now. We are going to focus on the solution. It is the constant, tireless redirection of the mind without the presence of anger.
Without anger, that feels like the secret ingredient. You don't get furious at the rescue dog for forgetting a trick. You just calmly run the drill again.
Precisely. And when we view these teachings holistically, we can see how these two verses, Shlokas 6.4 and 6.5, form an incredibly elegant, comprehensive psychological toolkit.
They absolutely do. Let's trace the arc of the journey we've taken through this commentary because we've covered so much ground.
We really have.
We began with Shloka 6.4, establishing the true benchmark of inner balance. We identified the necessity of breaking the dopamine loops, basically refusing to let our cognitive focus be hijacked by every sensory craving or push notification.
Right.
We confronted the exhaustion of sankalpa, recognizing that our obsessive future planning and our desire-driven projections are just fragile code waiting to crash.
And we recognize that the cure to that exhaustion is arriving at absolute presence with the immediate task. Right. And from there, we stepped into the profound accountability of Shloka 6.5. We accepted the radical responsibility that we are the sole architects of our psychological elevation or degradation.
The throne is ours to claim.
Yes. We learned to audit our inner dialogue, choosing the coaching voice of Udherd over the destructive criticism of Avasariyat. And most importantly, we dismantled the trap of victimhood, understanding that while we cannot control the external storms of the world, our inner peace is only destroyed when we surrender the throne to our own uncontrolled reactive thoughts.
It is a robust architectural foundation for a resilient mind. It is deeply encouraging to note the commentary's sign-off to Vijay here.
Oh, what does it say?
The text mentions that this exploration continues, moving into the subsequent stages with Shloka 6.6 and 6.7. This framing reinforces a critical takeaway. Achieving this balance is a step-by-step classical approach to steadying the mind. It is a daily training regimen, not a weekend hack.
It is the ultimate lifelong training program. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought.
Yeah,
Something to chew on that takes all of this ancient theory and drops it squarely into your reality.
I love that.
The text is uncompromising. No external force, no boss, no algorithm, and no stroke of bad luck can harm your peace as much as your own uncontrolled thoughts. It demands that you train your mind like a friend rather than fighting it like an enemy.
Right.
So I want you to look at your calendar for tomorrow. Identify the single most stressful event you have scheduled. Maybe it's a high-stakes performance review, or a deeply uncomfortable conversation with a family member, or a massive project deadline that just feels impossible.
We all have those days.
When you cross the threshold into that room, or when you open that specific email chain, what is the very first thing that friend inside your head is going to whisper to you?
That's a great question.
Are you going to allow it to immediately catastrophize, build a fragile projection of failure, and degrade your competence before you even speak your first word? Or are you going to claim your agency right in that microsecond and train it to be the ankle that holds you steady? Are you going to let the modern wilderness dictate your survival, or are you going to take your seat on the throne? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Dhyana Yoga. It has been a truly fascinating journey into the timeless mechanics of the human mind.